Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Costumeco channel. And today I have another amazing costume designer interview. My guest today is Michael Wilkinson. He is the costume designer behind Andor seasons 1 and 2. And I'm so delighted to have you, Michael. I can't even tell you. I was sort of bursting when I found out that we were going to be doing this interview.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, so thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with me. And you're coming in from Australia, but it's early for you, early Saturday morning. So hopefully you have a cup of coffee and
Okay, I'm ready to talk about everything to do with Andor.
wonderful. Well, before we get started, because I got your nationality wrong right out of the gate, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about how you got into costume design?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Australia, and then I moved to America. Well, I studied costume design here. I actually worked as like a dresser at the Sydney Opera House as a teenager. I think that's how I really got costumes under my skin, and I knew sort of from a very young age that I really wanted to be involved in the world of telling stories through costumes. And so I did a design course in sets and costumes for theatre and film straight after high school. I worked here in Sydney for about 10 years, designing mostly opera and theatre and live performance. Then when I hit 30, I decided to move to America, and I worked there in film for about 15 years, both New York and Los Angeles. And then about 10 years ago, I moved to the UK. So I'm now based in London.
So now what about Andor? How did that whole project come about and how did you get involved in that?
Well, I actually was involved. I interviewed and was chosen to work on a sort of previous incarnation of Andor with a different team. So when Tony Gilroy took over as showrunner, he sort of inherited me. But as soon as we started working together, it was really apparent pretty quickly that we were very simpatico. We both share a real love for complex characters and people that have lots of kind of interesting flaws and are very well-rounded. He's such an incredible writer, and it was a real gift, these incredible characters that he had created. They're very three-dimensional. They have their good days and their bad days, and they really kind of use their clothes a lot to express who they are. There was this whole idea of disguises and people having, alter egos, and so costumes were really very central to the storytelling. So that was really exciting to me straight away, and Tony and I really enjoyed getting into the nitty-gritty of all of that.
So now regarding the costumes, so when you came on board, you said you were already sitting at your desk sketching. Was the information in the script? Did you have some conversations with Tony? Like how did the initial ideas come about?
The scripts were really at quite an early stage when I came on board. It was more like the idea and the general worlds that we were going to be traveling to. But Tony really, things really shifted gears when Tony came on board, and the story had a really incredible strength to it and a huge scale to it all. And so I think that really helped me, hone in my research and my designs as soon as he started sort of creating and fleshing out all of these incredible characters. And I think what sort of helped us get on the same page too is that I think the fact that we were fascinated by the Star Wars universe, but we hadn't actually spent our whole lives, obsessing about the Star Wars universe. So it was I think we were able to bring a freshness perhaps to the Star Wars world that, we didn't hold it in such high reverence that, we were worried about, breaking the rules and things. I think the fact that we were fascinated by Star Wars and did all our homework and worked out, all of the language of the franchise and the canon and the history, but also felt free to make it our own. And I think Kathleen Kennedy was very encouraging in that way. She was like, I want to be surprised. I want you guys to take Star Wars to a place it's never been before. She wanted something kind of original. And so that was really exciting to be given that brief. That was very liberating.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why the fans just love the show so much because there's so many surprises in it. And I
Mm,
mean, like I did a live stream last week about it with another friend of mine, and we were talking about there were times like my jaw was on the floor. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so exciting, like on the seat, on the edge of your seat type of stuff. Um,
yeah,
so
I think also for a costume designer, it was great because Tony really wanted to take the franchise into. For him, it was like it was for grown-ups, for adults. It was like a drama. It wasn't like a
Mhm,
sort of for kids and preoccupied with action sequences and things. It was very tight, really complex,
mhm.
sophisticated writing. And I think I was very fortunate to be given that as my palette because it means you can do some really thorough, detailed costume work. It wasn't about cliches or just because it looks cool. Everything had to have a reason. Tony really wanted it to feel authentic and for the characters to feel like people and not just sort of, two-dimensional ideas of people, but very detailed, authentic, grounded people. So I was very happy to be working, costumes that had to express all of these interesting, well-rounded characters.
Yeah, it felt a little bit more grounded sci-fi as opposed to like maybe the original Star Wars is a bit fantasy sci-fi. So I felt, yeah, it felt like a real world like that we would visit and go to.
Mhm.
And speaking of that, like, the production design who is done by Luke Hull. Did you
Correct.
work closely with Luke? Because I just noticed, like, especially a lot of the interior scenes, just the textures and everything, they all seem to really complement each other.
Yeah, I feel like Luke Hull is like my design soulmate. He is such an incredible talent, and to be able to, I think we both share this sort of this passion for creating cultures and creating whole worlds on screen. We would get together for very long, detailed meetings about, okay, how are all these 9 planets that we're going to, how are they all different from each other? How can we define them through colors and textures, and not just sort of in a superficial way, but like let's think about who are these people? How do they express themselves in their architecture and their clothing? What materials do they have? What resources do they have? Is clothing important to them? Is it a work culture? Is it a very sophisticated culture? So it was really great to really go right deep with all of this thinking about why the costumes looked the way they did, why the sets looked the way they did, and to make sure that it was all making sense with the same design logic.
Now, you said you didn't work on Rogue One, but my question is, did you contact the original designers of Rogue One at all and have a chat with them?
Yeah, the designers for Rogue One were Dave Crossman and Glenn Dillon. They did an incredible job. So I checked in with them and said, I'm doing this. I have the greatest respect for what you guys did, and I will try and take the baton and keep designing in the same with the same vibe. I actually also asked Glenn if he wanted to come on board and help do a few costume illustrations of my designs. So that was wonderful to actually have him in the workroom with us. I thought it was a good idea for him to be helping develop costumes that did relate to Rogue One. Of course, we had a whole million different characters that really you didn't see in Rogue One. But people like Krennick and
Mhm.
Cassian and all the Yavin costumes. I got him to illustrate some of those, and he had some really interesting ideas, details to add, and adding his own amazing flair. Glenn is an amazing illustrator, and so it was wonderful to work with him, especially with things like the Yavin costumes, because in Andor, we're like the 5 years leading up to Rogue One. And so with Yavin, I had this really interesting design brief to show, how the look of the soldiers on Yavin were created. Like
Mhm.
we're dealing with the very beginnings of the Rebel Alliance being organized into a functioning unit. So when we see them arrive on Yavin a few years before Rogue One, they're all coming from different, planets, different corners of the galaxy. They're all disparate fighters that believe in the rebellion, but they have a kind of different look to them. And then I was able to sort of chart over the season 2 how their look becomes a bit more organized. They learn how to use weapons. They begin to wear a bit of a uniform, and it becomes much more of a uniform look to them. So Glenn and I really thought about, showing that progression in the costumes and how we would end up with the Rogue One look. What different elements would go together to show that progression. So that was really a fun thing to chart out with Glenn.
And Michael, I didn't have this in my questions, but I was having a discussion with my friend about it. So it sort of feels like an American GI toward the end. Like, what were you sort of inspired by there, or maybe a British World War II uniform? Did you have something in mind?
I mean, the great thing about Star Wars, as opposed to a lot of other franchises, I think, is that the references are always kind of real world, like whether it's ancient Tibet or the Vietnam War. There's always sort of elements of the costumes and the visual language that help audiences like relate to what's going on in the characters, as opposed to like pure fantasy where it's kind of like futuristic ideas that we've never seen before. I always try and like layer in some references that audience will sort of subliminally kind of get and be able to know more about the characters. So I think for Yavin, we did look quite a lot at the Vietnam War. We looked at World War II. I think we of course looked at all of the uniforms throughout the Star Wars canon, and there were certain elements and repeated motifs that we wanted to use. There was a color palette that we sort of backed into. So yeah, lots of thinking about the different details of these uniforms. And I think what was really important to me was, the Rebel Alliance are it's like the wave of humanity. It's like you and me. If we really felt passionately about something, what would we wear? And it really contrasts with the world of the Imperials, which is black and white. It's extreme, fastidious. It's very minimal lines. On the other hand, the Rebel Alliance, the people about Yavin, they're dirty, they're sweaty, their colors are much warmer and richer, it's layered. It just has more of this kind of human feel to it. So that was something I really had in mind too when I was coming up with a look for Yavin.
Oh yeah, sorry, this is what I was going to say. So season 2 it leads right into Rogue One. In fact, I watched Rogue One, like not right after, but pretty close, like the weekend after I binged Andor. You must have, did you sort of like say, okay, this is the end, which is also the beginning, and then work your way backwards? Like, how did you tackle that structurally? You know what I mean? Especially with Cassian, like who ends up in his, I don't know, hero costume that we see him in at the beginning of Rogue One.
Yeah, I think for all of the characters that we see in Rogue One, I had a really good think about how they got to that look. What was their backstory? Who were they 5 years earlier than that? So, for example, with Cassian, you can see right through from season 1 and season 2, he has this great arc to his look that's developing, where he's going from like someone who's trying to find himself. In season 1, he's like layered up and he's hiding in hoodies and you can't really tell who he is, and he's messing up. He's not the sort of very rigorous and disciplined soldier that he becomes by the end of season 2 and into Rogue One. So yeah, we wanted to show him becoming more and more together with his looks, with his disguises. He starts as like a young kid that doesn't really know what he wants and how to harness all of his skills, and he becomes more and more disciplined. So I think that look is shown in his costumes too. Like in season 1, it starts a bit more worn and shabby. Then he's using the resources that Luthen gives him and Claire to create these disguises, and they're more together and more convincing. But when he's the journalist that goes to the planet Goreman, and indeed to the Senate on Coruscant, his look is very together. He's really becoming the hero and someone who is got his act together and knows how to go on mission and get it done. So, and then that sort of naturally leads into his very heroic, iconic look in Rogue One, the last look that he has in our season with his fantastic leather jacket. And he looks like a really together action hero who's very capable and reliable.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it here, just so I can show everybody. I believe this is it. Oh, sorry, hold on a second here. So here he is when he's walking out of the forest. Yeah. Now, when you shot this, were you on set? Did you get to see him do this scene?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm always on set when we're seeing like a new costume that the camera hasn't seen before or the director hasn't seen before. I always like to be there to make sure that it's looking exactly how I want it to look, that the actor's happy, the director's happy. So yeah, this was shot actually, it's supposed to be this steamy tropical jungle, and this was on the lot at Pinewood in London.
Oh, no way.
I think it was like a kind of crisp early spring day. Everyone was a little cold, so we had to have warming layers and things underneath the costumes to keep everyone warm. But
you must have had goosebumps that day, though. I would have, like, you must have, or maybe when you watched it back after, you must have just been like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, all of the Yavin scenes, actually, it really felt like we were stepping back into this golden period of Star Wars, movie making, Rogue One, and to see those costumes, we actually had to make them from scratch again. We couldn't just, there wasn't a collection at Lucasfilm of all of this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Did you go to the archives to at least look at them and maybe take pictures of them?
Well, they only archived the principal costumes and only a few of them. So
sure.
I could have a look at the real ones of maybe a dozen or so from Rogue One, but apart from that, they have incredible photo archive, and so everything's documented beautifully. But yeah, I didn't, when I started the project, I thought, I'm just going to go to the archive and get all of those Rogue One costumes out, but no, they didn't exist. So all of the costumes that you see, we made from scratch in our workroom. We developed all of these different looks for Yavin over the years, and made hundreds of costumes for that in our workrooms. In fact, the scale of this project was really unlike anything I've done before. I've done some big projects, but this one really took the cake. I think it was like I had 12 weeks prep, and then the shoot was 34 weeks. And so, you're constantly shooting and at the same time then going back to the workroom and getting ready for the next thing that you're going to be establishing on camera. So yeah, I think we had 9 planets that we went to. We had
it's crazy.
We had over 200 principal cast members. That's just the speaking cast. And then a lot of them, the first 20 of them or so had about 10 to 20 costumes each. So just for the principal cast, I think we made over 700 costumes.
Oh my gosh. And then also you'd have the stunts and everything too, right? You have to do duplicates.
Multiples, and then literally thousands of extras over the month. So
oh my gosh.
All of that stuff was created from scratch too. So each costume had to have a working drawing, fabric swatches. We would source the fabrics and then manipulate them with our beautiful textile artists that we have on staff, and then it would go through to the workrooms, and they would pattern make and cut, and we would do prototypes, and then we would order the multiples of things. Sometimes we sent things out to factories, so they would make 10 of this and 20 of this, and then we would bring it back and over dye it and have our fittings on all of our thousands of extras. So yeah, it was
Michael, you must have had some assistant designers. Like I've spoken to some of these really big shows. Did you have like 2 or 3 assistant designers?
I did, yeah. I had an incredible team actually. So how I decided to set it up is that I had an assistant costume designer for the male cast, one for the female cast, and then I had 2 assistant costume designers that were developing the crowd costumes. And so each of those 2 had 4 planets each or something like that. So,
I love that. That's so fun.
This person was doing Coruscant. This person was
that's great. Did they fight over the planets?
No, I think I made sure they each got a very sophisticated, extravagant planet, and also a down and dirty planet.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Have a mixture of cool things. It was never
that's so fun.
But yeah, speaking of my team, I had beyond my assistants, I also had an incredible team of, there were about 92 people on staff full time for the whole job in the costume department. And then as well as that, they had, on the big shooting days, we had additional what we call day player shooting crew. So, if we had 500 extras, we would need to have 30 costumers come in to get them dressed in the morning, get them undressed at the end of the day, maintain all of the costumes. So it was a mammoth effort.
And this is where probably your supervisors and so on are there to help you and support you as well, which
Absolutely.
people don't realize what a
Yeah.
like, and did you have a shop in London where you did all the building, or did you have, as you said, you had to job some of it out? That must have been massive as well.
Yeah, we had this amazing footprint at Pinewood Studios.
Oh,
where we
okay, cool.
A lot of the sets
Where
were
the original Star Wars was shot too, right?
It was such a thrill being there. So you really felt like you were part of history.
Absolutely.
So we sort of spread our workrooms. We have found little corners all over Pinewood. So we had a workshop for the extras and a team building all of those costumes. We had a big fabric storage. It was divided into cast fabrics and then all of the crowd fabrics. We had our principal cutting room. So I had an incredible male cutter that did all the male principal costumes, one that did the female principal costumes. They all had their team of cutters and stitchers. I had an amazing team of textile artists who did all of the breakdown and distressing and making things look old and beautiful. I had a costume props team that did all of the sort of hard armor pieces and like the 3D printing and the molding and all of the accessories and jewelry. I had a millinery team doing hats and accessories. So it was just endless.
Oh my gosh. Did you have like a little, when you go a golf cart so you could get around and you have a bike or something? What did you do to get from like shop to shop?
Because it's such a commitment of time and you don't have time to exercise when you're doing these big jobs. I made sure that I walked everywhere.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
I think I paced around from one end to the studio every day, and I did over 20,000 steps every day. So that was
wow. And then that helps with the stress a bit too, right?
Exactly. You can just march it all.
For sure. And also, I was just to say, with Glenn Dillon, that must have been really nice to have him on hand, because also if you had questions, like, did he let you kind of like, Glenn, Glenn, can I please, have your ear about something?
Yeah, I really respected his point of view on things. So he knew a lot about the history of why things looked the way they did. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we had lots of great conversations about developing new characters and digging into the archive and pulling out cool, like iconic Star Wars references that, the fans would love seeing, certain badges or details on the costumes that would, be little Easter eggs into previous costumes.
Yeah, my friend Ro, he has a Scarif podcast. It's called Scarif Podcast, and all he does is Star Wars. So I actually had to ask him some of the things because I was like confused about some. I'm like, what's going on here? Now I want to just talk about Cassian a little bit. So, we have at the beginning of season 2, we have that really cool TIE fighter costume that he's wearing, which you have that little bit of red in it, which was really cool. But then also maybe we can talk a bit about Varian, Skye, and Ronni Googe. I think I'm saying that correctly, hopefully.
Yeah, but I think Cassian has about 13 costumes no, I think he has 17 costumes in season 2. He has the TIE fighter costume is what he spent most of the
one here.
Exactly. So it's always a fun part of designing for Star Wars is sort of looking at the sort of iconic Imperial uniforms and taking them in your own direction. There's always new corners of the Imperial world that are being explored. In this case, it's like a test fighter uniform. So we've all seen the black TIE fighter uniform in Star Wars before, but I wanted to make this one a little bit different because it's like they're testing out a new type of ship. And so I added this red detail to the top of him to give it sort of an iconic, strong look, because he was going to be in this costume for the first 3 episodes. So I wanted to make sure that I put a lot of thought and made it as sort of interesting as possible. So wherever he is, he really sort of stands out with this beautiful red detail across the top of the uniform. And we developed the armor that he wears when he's fighting, when he's piloting the ship. It's based on things from Star Wars, but giving it our own angle, our own version of it. So I thought it was such a great idea of Tony's to have our Rebel Alliance hero in an Imperial uniform for the first 3 episodes. It's so audacious.
Of course.
In the enemy's costume. It's like,
I know. It's sort of a callback to Luke and Han being in the stormtrooper uniforms, right?
Yeah, good reference. Yeah, you've done it. Very nice.
And then also, okay, well, this was you must have gotten a lot of attention about this one. So his the first thing is doing the planet, doing those costumes on that planet where you have all those costume designer, fashion designers. I mean, the Goreman, sorry. That must have been so fun. It's a little bit meta for you, to be designing Cassian as a fashion designer when you yourself are a costume designer. Was that a fun experience for you?
Absolutely, really fun. And also because a lot of Cassian's looks are kind of usually quite down and dirty and rough and heroic. So to do something that was the opposite to that was very sophisticated and elegant and tailored and had this kind of fashion edge to it was really great. And it was something that Diego was really excited about exploring that. So yes, we developed a look for him that was very tailored, very sort of minimal, with these beautiful layered fabrics, and he has a very sharp silhouette with a beautiful flowing cape that goes over the top. So something very impactful. He has his cool glasses that I developed for him. So I think our inspiration was more sort of Karl Lagerfeld and that sort of that sort of vibe of very serious designers that have an incredible eye and are very elegant and really know the power of this very minimal, sharp way of dressing.
Is it true that there haven't been sunglasses worn? I mean, except for the goggles that the stormtroopers would wear. But is it true that there haven't been fashion sunglasses in Star Wars universe before?
I think there hasn't been much of a precedent to that. There was quite a discussion about it where we're like, oh, do we have sunglasses in Star Wars? Is that a thing? But I think we saw it more for a visor, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Or it's something, again, it's does it have a function, or is it just something that people who are very aware of their image and want to be a little bit disguised say, well, why? There's no reason why there can't be, visors and sunglasses in Star Wars. So we just went for it.
Yeah, it feels very futuristic. The sunglasses as well. But I love that. I loved his hair. I know that's not your department, but I love his hair because it's just I don't know if that's Diego Luna's own hair, but it just looked like he had a lot of pomade in it or something.
So slick. Yeah.
The whole look was amazing. And actually, by the way, I was going to say at the hotel he stays at, the uniforms worn by the bellhops. Just gorgeous.
Thank you. The whole thing with Goreman is my references and my thoughts about that were sort of, we looked a lot at the World War II and the sort of resistance movement in Europe, especially Italy and France. So we really wanted to capture for Goreman this sort of mid 20th century elegance and this sort of wonderful proud way of dressing. Everything. It's a planet where their main income is developing beautiful fabrics and things. So it's, we thought of places like Milan and Turin and perhaps even Paris, places that have this wonderful culture that they're very proud of, that they want to protect. So it's so horrific then when the Empire wants to come in and destroy this beautiful, proud tradition that they have. So that's what I wanted to get across in the costume, this sense of fine tailoring. It's quite austere, it's not flashy or showy. It's just beautiful fabrics, well put together, a fine eye for detail and tailoring, beautiful overcoats and hats and gloves and this sort of wonderful, European way of dressing. That it was a wonderful thing to develop.
I was going to ask you, I don't know if you've seen a new look with Ben Mendelsohn. This was sort of meta for me because I'd seen that before, and he plays Christian Dior in it, and his sister is in the French Resistance. And so you have all of these, amazing, iconic French fashion designers who are in an occupied Paris during World War II. And so, but they have to kind of carry on and they have to keep going in a way. So that's sort of what it felt like for me for the Goreman, like that they were being occupied and at the same time they had to carry on. By the way, I was telling someone that there is such a thing as a spider silk. There's a golden orb spider silk. So there is a real world allegory for the Goreman spider.
I did not know that. I'll have to look into that.
It's very strong. Like they actually, I think it was the Met had an exhibit with a cloak that was made, and it's a beautiful golden silk. And apparently it's as strong as Kevlar. It's very strong. Wow. So yeah. So I thought that was actually, I don't know if Tony had that sort of idea in mind when he came up with that. So I thought that was a very cool thing.
Yeah.
The other costume, well, I mean, obviously Cassian has a lot of costumes, as you mentioned, but there was this one here. A lot of people love this one, this coat when he's on Goreman.
So that's the second disguise that he has on Goreman. He comes back a second time. So I had to make
Ronni. Sure I think that's Ronni.
Yeah, the second time he comes back as like a war journalist, sort of out on the field correspondent. So I wanted this journalist look to be as different as possible to his look as the fashion designer. So the palette is completely different. It's this lovely kind of warm, natural, sort of neutral colors. I found this beautiful, it's like a sort of antique linen that had this beautiful weight and drape to it for his overcoat. And then I added, lots of cool detailing and stitching and leather detailing and stuff to the coat. So yeah, we wanted it to have this sort of sense of ease, and he was at ease anywhere in the world. Something that contrasted from the locals and the look of the Goremans. It was clear that he wasn't from there, that he was coming to report on the scene in Goreman. So
yeah, I just realized in this picture is when he says, "Who are you?" to Syril.
Syril, yeah.
I don't know if you call it a boss battle. My kids play video games, so they have that big, incredible. And that would be another thing too. You would have to keep all of that in mind when you're doing these battles, right? Or they're doing these fights.
Yeah, you're creating these costumes, and you have to think about how will they move for these big stunt sequences. Are they going to they both have very long coats, and so when they move, the coat swings out, and it creates all these really dramatic shapes for the camera. Especially Syril, I really love the coat that he wears.
Oh yeah, I have a picture of that.
One of my favorite costumes. It's got this beautiful sort of wingback detail to it, and it's out of a really beautiful fine wool that flows so great. And so when those two guys are fighting together, it's this wonderful flurry of fabric and shapes. Yeah, there
it is here. And here's a close-up. And also, I love how you do the details on the lapels, and you have that little bit of a black accent. But by the way, my cohort, the one who I did the live stream at, we were like just going crazy about the way you do a tie. I have never seen anyone do a tie this way, and it is so unique. And it was one of the first things I noticed in season 2. Maybe you had it in season 1. I don't remember it, but
we did touch on it in season 1.
Okay.
Came out of it. We were trying to think about, okay, what is the world of Star Wars bureaucracy? What is like the corporate guy wear when he goes to work?
His other outfit.
Yeah, and we obviously didn't want to do like the real world classic knotted tie. And it's like, okay, what's the equivalent to that in our Star Wars language? So we came up with this idea of like a metal sort of loop through which you feed this strip of fabric, and that became our sort of Star Wars working bureaucratic uniform. So it was fun to bring it back again in season 2. This is a scene that I really love. We get to see the very first time in Star Wars what an imperial officer wears when they're in the domestic environment, when they go home and they're not in their uniform. What do they wear? And so for Dedra, we saw her in season 1 in her very crisp, beautiful, precise imperial uniforms. And then in season 2, I was excited to work out, okay, well, when she goes home, what does she wear and what does that look like? So we figured it would have a similar kind of fastidious, look to it, very sharply tailored. That's her aesthetic. She sees the world in black and white. There's not a lot of other color, in the world. She has a very specific worldview, and we wanted to express that in her at-home costumes too. So I came up with a series of looks that are very architectural and black and white and have some very precise detailing in them, some sort of metal fixtures and fasteners, but very sharp, angular tailoring. So that was something that I really loved working with Denise Scott, the actress. She was thrilled that she would not have to be in the uniform the whole series. Oh yeah, here's another version.
Here's another one, but this is what's so funny about her. Like there's that scene in front of the mirror where she has like a black outfit, white outfit, white outfit. It's so hilarious. In fact, Michael, I don't know if you've seen it, but someone has taken the whole Syril and Dedra sort of like relationship and made it into like a sitcom opening.
Oh my gosh, what a great idea.
It's so hilarious. And then there's a scene where she's just like, it's sort of like, it reminds me of Rhoda or something. And at the beginning, so she's showing like, she's trying to practice smiling in the mirror with the 2 outfits. Just like gold. Comedy gold.
Yeah. I love also the other element is when Eedy, I
have a picture of her mom or his mom.
Arrives. And I really wanted it to be this explosion of I was thinking, what's Dedra's probably least favorite color? And I thought this kind of weird tangerine, bright, loud color explodes into her beautiful, minimal apartment. And I had fun, I made it sort of quite a detailed, there's lots of trim and sort of ornament. That's everything that Dedra isn't is sort of personified in this costume. So it was fun to sort of see this little tangerine explosion happen.
Yeah, because the apartment building looks almost like brutalist a bit, like it looks like concrete or it's very stark. And then she comes in and just like you say, an explosion. By the way, I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this. She reminds me so much of Nancy Walker.
Oh my gosh.
Rhoda. She's because we were talking about how their relationship, it's sort of like a 1950s sitcom, like the Honeymooners or the Flintstones. You've got this mother-in-law, this overbearing mother-in-law, and who's also or Bewitched or something. That's what I was saying. So that sort of reminded me of that. So her costumes, oh my gosh, they're so, and I heard it just like in her apartment, sitting at that little nook, while Syril's eating blue cereal or blue milk, I should say.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. She has a color palette that is very distinct. No one else really has her colors. This is very rich kind of. She has oranges. She has purple. She has aquamarine sort of colors, mustardy yellows. All these kind of 60s retro color combinations, and it's all very considered. Even though she probably doesn't leave the house very often, she gets dressed every day, and the earrings match the shoes, which match the bracelet, and it's all very kind of considered. And she's putting her whole look together, so she's got her own costume thing going on there.
Yeah, I just thought about this while you were talking, that even the sauce kind of matched her outfit a little bit. She's eating the sauce. And she's sloshing all over the place while Dedra's losing her mind, kind of thing. Now, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the ISB design. So, I wanted to get a little bit into, Ben Mendelsohn's costume and maybe a few of the other ISB uniforms. So we talked about Dedra a little bit, but here's Ben Mendelsohn here at Krennick. And then now I read that you did, so obviously this was in the original source material, Rogue One, but you did do some different things with his cape. Like I read that you used different fabrics for his cape. For this part, like the party, for instance, this one.
Exactly. So for that scene that on the screen now, it's sort of like his formal, sort of like his dress uniform. So later on we see his sort of day look that we've sort of seen in Rogue One. But we had this party scene in episode 6 where it's like, every uniform has the day look, and then they have what they call a dress uniform, which is the one that's very official. So I had fun sort of taking the idea of the day look and then developing it into a dress uniform. So we added these collar pips, epaulets.
Oh, this is different. Sorry, yes.
We have like a bandolier going across the evening uniform with silver trim on the belt. And we made a cape for him out of this beautiful kind of more satiny fabric that has this evening wear quality to it. So it moves really beautifully, and it sort of feels a much more sort of upscale version to his daytime look. And yeah, Ben really loved this new development in his costume. I think when he first tried it on, he was twirling around the dressing room, and he thought he said, "Oh, this is like my Elvis cape. I love this."
Oh yeah, I've heard. He's so funny, by the way, and a friend of mine has worked with him as well. He is so funny. Is this your first time working with him, being an Aussie?
You know what? It's not.
It's not. Okay.
In the mid 1990s, I did a film with him when
he was way.
Yeah, a child. It had all these great Australian actors in it, and he was one of them. So it was the first thing that I did to remind him when I saw him again. It's like, do you remember a film we did in Melbourne in like?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I know. So it's great to see him again.
One of his capes kind of feels like almost like a rain cape. Like, I guess it's sort of like it will withstand all the elements and everything. Is that what that like? I don't know if it's this scene where he's doing his big speech.
I think it's sort of based on World War II, what they call a foul weather cape. So it's for something exactly. It's to protect you from winds and rains and that sort of thing. That was the original inspiration, I believe, for that cape. So that's more of a daytime look. And then we developed the evening dress uniform.
I was going to say, so here's Dedra's uniform. Now, is this pure white, or is there a little bit of a hint of gray in it?
Good. Very well observed. So, in fact, what I did with the ISB uniforms, because I wanted to sort of indicate a little bit of ranking and sort of hierarchy within the ISB. And so there's actually 3 different colors in the ISB uniforms. So the main heads, the very high-ranking officers, like Partigas, he has like quite a snowy white uniform. That's the brightest white, the same color as Ben Mendelsohn Krennick's uniform. And then when you get to the second round of officers, like Dedra's level, it's actually kind of a stony gray color. It's a little deeper in color. And then their assistants, a lower rank, have an even sort of like a darker gray. It's still pale, but I just wanted to show that there was a hierarchy within that. And then there's all sorts of other elements to their costumes. Yeah, so you can see that there's slightly different.
I wasn't sure if it was the the filters, or if that was like truly because even like working with pure white would be very difficult, I would think, right?
Yes, and all the sets were white, and so Luke and I had to sort of get together and discuss whites, and when the costume was going to be a little brighter, when that was going to be a bit darker than the background, to make sure that they felt like they belonged in that world, but there was enough definition that it wasn't just like a snowstorm.
And I love here how they've stripped down everything off of her, like all of her insignia, all of her, cylinders and belt and everything. We were talking about it, like, is it because she could use it as a weapon? Is it just to humiliate her? Like, what were your thoughts behind that?
I think it was the humiliation mostly, that she had just stripped of all of her ranking and her access and her badges of honor, that it was this really, like, she thought that she was going to rise up through the ranks, and in fact the whole thing of season 2 is like her undoing as an officer, and so this sense that she actually, and then the final humiliation, of course, is when we see her in the prison uniform.
Yes, which I have here. Yeah.
Which is like really not where she thought she was going to end up. And Denise just played it so incredibly. The nuance, what was going on inside her mind that was expressed by her performance was just, it just took my breath away. So it was really great collaborating with Denise.
Now, I didn't get to talk. Well, maybe if I can hold you for just a little while, like a few more minutes, because we didn't get to talk about Mon Mothma. Do you want to we can quickly chat about her before I let you go?
Yeah, of course.
I
So
have a couple of pictures of her. I have this one. This is the one I saw that you have on Instagram, showing sort of the how you came through this one.
So I think Mon Mothma had about 15 costumes in season 2. And the first 3 episodes are all set on Chandrila. And I think even within those, there's about 9 different costumes there showing this amazing 3-day wedding event. We see her in her sort of ritualistic hiking uniform when they go up the top of the mountain to perform their sacred wedding rites. Then we see her at different parties and functions, welcoming all her guests, and then leading up to the wedding itself. And so that was an amazing palette, 9 costumes to show this sort of transition through this very formal, ritualized Chandrilan event. And what I love about Chandrila, we hadn't really seen that planet before, Andor. And so I got to really develop the look of that culture from the ground up. And I really wanted to show its formality, the precision of the dressing, its beautiful layered looks. It sort of has quite a Japanese, Korean kind of vibe to it, mixed with a little sort of Scandinavian influence in there too. But I felt like it really reflected Mon Mothma's formality and the sort of restrictions of her life. She sort of has this sort of mask that she has to wear, which is very together and formal. But behind that is the chaos of, working as a rebel alliance, sympathizer, and sort of doing all of these things behind the scenes, funding the rebel alliance movement, having this whole pretense. So the fact that her costumes are so sculpted and tailored and controlled and precise and beautiful really helps with this sense of togetherness that she presents to the world. Of course, in the wedding sequence, that all breaks down at the very end of the 3rd episode, where she's had this grueling 3-day event that she's had to come through. She's just ordered the assassination of one of her amazing old friends, Taekoma. So she's in a complete state of panic and overwhelmingness, and she decides to have a few drinks and to use the music of the sort of wedding celebrations to lose herself and to try and forget all of this. And there's this amazing scene where she's dancing at the end of episode 3. And I knew I had to design a dress that would really move beautifully and create great shapes as she twirls through the crowd. And in fact, there's like 500 extras there that all have these sort of pleated costumes that with beautiful trailing sleeves and cloaks and veils and things, so that when they're all moving around, you get this incredible sense of, a sort of beautiful chaos of shapes and colors that she's sort of trapped in. And so, a lot of thought went into costumes that would move beautifully for this final dance sequence.
Yeah, well, I can't even believe how much work that must have been to do that whole 3-day wedding. So while Andor is in his TIE fighter uniform, she has multiple changes. And you're talking about the gold, that's sort of a beautiful golden costume that she wore at the end, and she's able to sort of like put her arms up in the air and feel the music and everything. Someone was saying it's sort of like the Star Wars equivalent of a rave, I guess.
Exactly. We had the music that we saw in season 1 that's been turned into this dance track, and it's so unexpected. And I think working with Genevieve O'Reilly,
and she's just stunning as well. Like I was saying, I can't, like, everything you put on her just looks stunning. There's one costume that she wears. It's very, very fitted, and it's got a bit of a beaded drapes, and it felt very old world, like very old Hollywood. Were there any particular fashion designers or like costume designers that you sort of, or historical things that you were looking at to sort of come up with some looks for her?
I think the inspiration was quite, I cast the net pretty wide, because as well as the sort of Japanese, Korean influences, I really love, as you say, the old school designers from the 30s and the 40s. I love Vionnet and Madame Grey.
Yeah,
people
because you have all the pleating, the beautiful pleating.
and that sort of
Yeah.
almost Grecian neoclassical draped
Mhm.
kind of vibe, and you get this sort of screen goddess kind of vibe from a lot of their silhouettes. So yeah, it was pleating. It was a little bit of Miyake as well. I love
Mhm.
all the incredible shapes that he does and the pleating that he does.
I
Incredible
got to
silhouette.
see Miyake actually at a function one time. Like he was speaking, it was so great in Toronto. Hmm.
He's a
Um,
real hero of mine.
oh yeah, absolutely wonderful. But also, I was saying that I thought that a lot because you have that sort of Japanese, Korean sort of influences as well. It felt like origami in a lot of times, like the way it looks like it was folded, like just the way you did the beautiful construction of some of her gowns, like especially the one I think when she's doing that oneer, I think you call it a oneer, where
Mhm.
she's doing the fast walking, and it's sort of like a bit of a kimono style
Uh,
jacket with an obi, and then it's got the pleating on the sleeves. That one, like, just I was like, oh my gosh, the way the seams were done. It's on the starwars.com website because I believe you did an interview with them. So I should put a link for that so people can look at all the beautifully detailed photos that you have there.
mm.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I'm glad
Mm.
you noticed. We did a lot. It was again like to do with the collaboration with the other designers, the set designer, and even the set decorator. We talked a lot about origami and pleated shapes, and so I think you'll see in a lot of the architecture, there's sort of repeated sort of folded elements, and even like the flower displays and the wedding, the way the napkins are folded on the tables. It was all really planned, so that it
Mhm.
felt like a very complete culture that had its own design logic.
It was beautiful. Like the decor for the wedding itself was just like stunning. Like I can't, I mean, it'd be like a one percenter. Like that would be a wedding of a one percenter, I think, in our world. Um, so if it's okay, I have one last question. It's my one of my patrons. He has this question for you, if it's okay. He asked, his name is Tommy Essen. He's a huge fan of yours. And he says, how do you feel about fans cosplaying your designs? So he says, not just Andor, but also 300, Watchmen, Tron, and some of your DC films. Is there a cosplay of your work that stands out in your memory? Like, do you ever go to these fan expo or San Diego Comic-Con or any of those things? Do you do
Yeah,
those?
yeah. I mean, it's always so interesting for me to see how people take my designs and interpret them in their own way and make them their own, because everyone sees something in a costume that they relate to and they want to reproduce, but they always add their own spin to it. So I love seeing that. And it just really feels amazing to be working on characters that mean so much to people. I feel very honored, and I feel very responsible too to the fans to make these costumes as interesting and compelling and inspiring as possible. It really sort of pushes me and inspires me to try and be my best. But yeah, I have done a couple of these events. I went to San Diego Comic-Con and I saw lots of Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman
Oh yeah.
that I designed. I went to a Brazilian Comic-Con for Andor, which was incredible. And then 2 years ago, there was this amazing Star Wars celebration event where I was up on stage with Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna, and we looked down, and there was a whole swathe of people that were dressed as the prisoners from the prison in season one, and they were all chanting One Way Out, and they were all they actually came onto the stage with us, and we had this wonderful photo. So it was really
Yeah,
overwhelming.
I read an interview you speaking about that and how you were kind of surprised by that. Where you were like,
Yeah.
"What?"
I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
So and they pulled it together quite quickly. What are those made out of? They look kind of like Tyvek or something.
Yeah, it's this weird sort of like
Mhm.
papery fabric that's like,
Yeah, because it's disposable.
yeah, we wanted something that was the most dehumanizing fabric as possible. So it's disposable. You can hose them down at the end of
Mm.
the day. It's very
They don't get
non
to wear shoes, which
They
is
don't
also
get to wear
humiliating.
shoes. Exactly. They've got
Mhm.
kind of stripes on them to make sure that they all look the same and that they stand out from their white environments. So yeah, that was great. And actually, a little Easter egg, I used a few of those detailing in the hospital uniforms that I think you see.
I have one picture. I love the hospital costumes.
I can't remember, it's episode 11, 10, 11.
You see if I can
So I
find it.
thought it'd be fun to like hint and to refer slightly back to this.
I just have this one here.
Yeah, exactly. So I used some of the design details, but I thought, well, they're both sort of, institutions, a hospital, it makes sense that there's like a design sort of connection there. But we chose this really interesting sort of acid yellow color palette that gave it its own kind of vibe in Luke's whole sets. So yeah, we got to sort of refer a little bit back to season 1 in these uniforms.
And again, like the atmosphere, that your costumes are against, or this is really institutional white, everything is, like you say, it could be hosed down. It could be, it could be, it's very modern looking, but then having those colors against that is like, that yellow. I love that. I love the silhouette of these costumes.
That's sort of like, even in there's no like boring moment in Star Wars. Even the uniforms and things are a real opportunity to do something, interesting and thoughtful, and that sort of, help explain the predicaments or the characters themselves. So designing the uniforms, usually people think, oh, is that really boring? But no, they're so interesting to do.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things, but I love that too, because obviously you had to, you have the stormtroopers, but although you did get an opportunity to come up with some different things. But one of the things, this is what I was asking my friend Ro about, is when, for instance, on Coruscant, when you have the blue sort of Imperial, I've never seen that before. You had that really beautiful, like kind of blue uniform. I guess it's kind of like their the Senate guard.
Yeah.
I guess you would call them. And I've never seen that color. Is that true? Has it never been in the show before?
Yeah, that's something that we created for Andor season 2. We wanted a color that was sort of closely associated with the Senate, and blue seemed to be a really good choice for that. And so so some of the Senate guards and some of the different people that work at the Senate have blue uniforms. We created little badges also that denote Senate workers, and they're also blue. So yeah, I think it goes actually back to a very early canon Senate guard uniform, which is much more theatrical and stylized. And I believe that was also in a blue color. And so we thought blue's a natural choice, but let's make it specific to our world in Andor. So we did our own version of that uniform.
Well, Michael, I could just keep talking to you forever, by the way. I didn't even get through all my questions. And I told you I had to actually whittle this list down. I think I had 40 questions. So
amazing. We'll have to do part 2 next week.
We should do part 2. Jack is here, so we have to make sure we stay on time. But so I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been such a thrill. And I'm not saying this is like, I normally, I'm not trying to suck up or anything, but this is probably like in my top 10 favorite shows of all time. It is so amazing. And I'm like, if you go on Reddit, like the fans, oh my gosh, like everyone. And I think what it is because it's a bit more for people like me who were 10 when I saw Star Wars originally. And now I'm an adult, and I have my own children who are watching Star Wars. So to have a show that sort of is for us in a way, like, I think that's how I sort of feel. I'm not saying that young people can't get something out of this, but it goes like it's grown up with us. So
I'm really glad you got that. That was really our goal. Something that is like, has the level of thinking and the thoroughness of a design approach that really matches the sophistication of the writing and these really compelling modern characters. So I'm glad that came across. For a designer, it was great to actually have that space to show such massive arcs for everyone. I mean, no one ends up in the look that they started in at the beginning of the season. They all, you could really explore little corners of the backstory and what they were wearing in different stages of their life. For example, you got to see Luthen and Clea. You sort of saw their backstory.
Oh, and Clea, I just threw that one up. She felt very old Hollywood again to me, like very so like sophisticated, and and then also to have that flashback of her, and then to see where she started and then where she ended up, and then of course Luthen, who, you know, he's sort of two personas in a way. Just fabulous.
Amazing to chart his journey from like a very disillusioned Imperial soldier, like shock horror. He was fighting on the other side, and then how he broke down from that, became like a small time kind of hustler, wheeler dealer, and then became and developed this persona to being a very well-funded, sophisticated spy master on planet Coruscant with lots of assets and power. To show that journey in costumes over like I think 5 or 6 different costumes was really, really fun to chart that development.
Yeah, and then on his last day when Clea says, like, tuck your shirt in, you know, I think he's dressing. I have this picture of him where he's dressing here, you know. Anyway, I have to let you go because I've kept you so long, and Jack isn't going to be happy with me. So thank you so much, and hopefully we can reconnect again and maybe talk more about Andor if you're up to it.
So much, Heidi. Thanks for your really smart and well-informed questions.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm a huge fan, so thank you so much.
Great. Okay, well, have a great day. And
you as well. All right. And bye, everyone who's watched. Thank you so much, and thanks so much to my patrons for the great question. Take care, everyone. Bye.